Welcome to the Honest Homeschool podcast, where we have real conversations with real homeschool moms. We're a roundtable of 7 different voices rotating each week to talk about the messy, meaningful, and sometimes hilarious parts of homeschooling. Today, we're chatting about books we think every homeschool mom should read, and we're so glad you're here for it. I'm Katie Klein, and today I'm joined by Beth Howard.
Hi.
Carla Snipes.
Hey there.
And Jess Collier.
Hi.
If you haven't already, don't forget to follow the show and leave us a review. It helps more homeschoolers like you find this space. All right, let's dive in.
So I love talking about reading, especially for moms, and I think it's actually really essential to us, not just as homeschooling moms, but as people. When we pick up a book, whether it's a classic or a modern literature or a biography or something that just stirs our imagination, we're actually feeding our minds and nurturing our souls. And as moms, we spend a lot of time pouring into our children and our home. And a lot of us have like side jobs or things like that. So we pour into those professions. But reading allows us to pour back into ourselves. We're able to broaden our perspectives, deepen our compassion, and it helps give us fresh ideas and living thoughts to meditate on inside of our homes. So, when the mom's learning, I really believe that we are able to create an atmosphere where our children see that education isn't limited to just childhood and school. It's actually a lifelong delight.
That's so good, Beth. I totally agree with you. And I feel like I have struggled at different seasons of motherhood to really I've always been a reader my whole entire life, but different seasons of motherhood, it was really a struggle to pick up a book and to prioritize that. And in this current season of motherhood, where most of my 5 kids are older, Katie and I were just talking about most of my kids are in high school. I have a middle schooler, I have one elementary, so I don't have any little tiny babies. And even when I had a little tiny baby and I would sit and nurse the baby, I had lots of time to sit and read a book. But, I've had different seasons where I've only had time to listen to an audiobook, or I've only had time to read books with my kids, or I've only had the capacity to read my Bible. Like, I've just had seasons where it's been like spurts here and there, and other seasons like now where I feel like I have time to read fiction that I love again. And I think it's important as moms to recognize that those seasons are okay. It's fine to have seasons where you might just be listening to audiobooks, or you might only be reading chapter books that you read aloud to your kids. And it's all good, and there's grace for all of it. And just embrace whatever season that you're in right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's so important because we don't want moms to feel discouraged listening to this and hear, oh, I don't have time to read. And all these gals are sharing these wonderful titles with me, because it is really seasonal. But even, if you can read in the margins of your day, even short, little 20 minutes here, 10 minutes here, you can make your way through a lot of titles that way. I know I spent a lot of years just piecemealing a book together. But today we want to share with you all 3 of our favorite titles. I don't want to say top titles, or, there's so many books. If you know a homeschool mom, there's one thing that we all love, and that is books. We love reading books. We love talking about books. We love collecting books, all things books. So we had a terrible time narrowing it down, but today we've decided just to share 3 of our favorite titles.
I think, Katie, what you said, reading, talking, and collecting books, those are 3 separate hobbies in the literature world too. so
So true.
my first book that I picked, and this one was actually really easy for me to decide. It is called The Sense of Wonder by Rachel Carson. And if you know Rachel Carson, she also wrote a book called Silent Spring. She wrote a book about oceans, and those 2 are very dense and wonderful to read. But The Sense of Wonder it is like nature magic that inspires you to go out and be in nature, especially with a child. This particular copy, this one has photographs in it, photographs by Nick Kels. And it's just wonderful. Like there's a picture of a fern and it inspires you to go out and see the fern. But she really looks at nature, like this sense of wonder with nature, through the eyes of a child. So when a child delights over a flower as an adult, like we should take a second and stop and not just like pass by and say like, oh yeah, it's a dandelion. We've seen millions of dandelions and we're gonna, you know, my sidebar, my son protested my husband pulling all of our dandelions this year and made a little sign. But like he delights in the magic of a dandelion. And as an adult, like we should take a second and stop and notice like what about this really is beautiful to you. This is one of those books where I think if you are a mom who is struggling with nature study, just even wanting to go and do nature study, this is one of those like inspiring books that will call you into nature. Not perfectly. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to go camping, but like just go outside and look at a flower.
Wait,
Oh,
should we
that's a good.
recommend this book to Kristen? Wasn't she
That's what
talking?
I was gonna
I
say.
know.
So
Yeah,
this is
Kristen.
Kristen's. This is what we're gonna give Kristen for Christmas. Good.
And then
Okay, added.
I will mail it to her. We'll pass it around. We'll all sign it, and then
That's
Perfect.
good.
I love this idea. Well, the book that I was thinking of, there, like Katie said, it's so hard to narrow it down, but one I thought for sure is called Treasuring Christ When Your Hands Are Full by Gloria Furman. She's written a lot of good books. And this one isn't necessarily written specifically for a homeschool mom, just really the bigger picture of motherhood. But there's just a very real struggle trying to balance it all when you're homeschooling. You're teaching your kids, you've got housework, schoolwork, doctor's appointments, therapies, mothering, you're a wife, a daughter, maybe a sister, a friend, active in your community, in your church. Just it's a lot. It's overwhelming. And that's super normal. Like it's an overwhelming calling being a homeschool mom. And so I just really love this book because it just helps shift your perspective back on truth. It's a very real reality that we can treasure him even in all the, craziness of day-to-day life, so much going on. Just remembering he's the giver of that grace that we need throughout each day. He sustains us, he strengthens us, he gives us wisdom. And I don't know about y'all, but I know I forget so quickly and so easily, especially when I'm weary and like the hundreds of little sacrifices every day with homeschooling. And it's a good book to realign my perspective back to truth. And so it's a short book. It's an easy to read kind of a book. And those are great. No matter what season of motherhood or life or homeschooling you're in, those short, easy to read books are just encouraging. Short, easy to read books are they're the best.
yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a book you could easily take with you if you're like
Oh yeah.
taking a kid to an appointment or, sitting at soccer practice or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
One of the books that I chose is called Hold On to Your Kids. I apologize that I'm going to butcher these names. Gordon Neufeld and Gaber Mate. I actually don't know if that's correct. Does anybody know?
You
if
did
that's
great. You did
Okay.
great. Yes.
So this is not a homeschooling book either. It's definitely a parenting book, not a Christian parenting book, but it's probably in my mind one of the best parenting books that I've read. And my oldest is about to turn 18, so I feel like I've read a lot of parenting books over the years. But this book is all about why parents need to matter more than peers. And I think in our society, we have this idea that like we got to push our kids out and they have to like make friends, which of course we want them to make friends, but that their friends are like the most important people in their lives. And this book really talks about not only like the practical things about why having a parent and family centric relationship with your kids, like why that is so important and why that has to be more important than having kids who are more peer oriented. But it even talks about like the science and the psychology of why that impacts kids in a really negative way when they are more peer oriented. So, we just live in this like individualistic world and everything is so pushed out of the home, And
Mhm.
this is not like a homeschooling book, but I think it would, like, if someone was
Yeah.
considering homeschooling or if they were on the fence, I think this would easily like persuade them to be a homeschooling family.
It's
So
very homeschooling adjacent.
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
exactly. And it really talks a lot about how building those like parent and family relationships will actually like build your kids' identity in a positive way and obviously will strengthen your relationships. And I just really, I actually recommend too that you read it with other moms. I actually read this book
Mhm.
in a book club with other moms, and I think it is really powerful that way because you can have conversations about it and talk about how sometimes it is difficult.
It's a good
Yeah,
one.
I
My husband, who was homeschooled all the way through and is a reader, he actually was the one who read it first, and he said, "You have to read this book. I think everyone should read this book. It's just,
Mhm.
it's that good. It's a good one."
Yes, I agree. And also, I think if there's people that you know that are like anti homeschooling, I think this would kind of at least
Make them
help
think.
them to
Yeah.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read it, and I feel like it's beneficial even just for all parents in general to understand the interactions between peers and children, and just to even have an awareness to that. That your child can become peer dependent, and yeah, it's a good one. The book
Yeah.
that I chose first is called Rembrandt is in the Wind. It's by Russ Ramsey. It says Learning to Love Art Through the Eyes of Faith. This book is part art history, part Bible study, and part just the story of human experience. It goes through 9 artists and their life story, their struggles, their triumphs, their faith or lack of. And it does an incredible job of tying it all into art and how art and faith really intersect. And what I love about it too is that it includes like these really beautiful color art prints in the center. So you can reference and see some of the art that he's talking about in the book. And then at the end, the appendix is really great. It has tons of information on how to visit an art museum, which I found especially helpful for taking kids to an art museum. It sounds like simple. Oh, you just go to the art museum and you just look at the art, but it's not really that simple.
Yeah.
He even has something in the appendix called How to Look at a Piece of Art. And then he also has a whole overview of Western art from the Renaissance all the way to modern art. And I think that this is a great book for homeschool moms, especially if you're somebody who is intimidated by art study, or maybe you're like me and never had any art education, especially of this kind of art in your education growing up. And I think that the book itself really captures the heart behind art study and just the beauty of it and how that's a reflection of God's glory. The first chapter alone just changed me, and it changed the way that I view art and the way that I study it. It made me appreciate art so much more when we've been to museums or I'm studying it with my kids. It's just one of those books that I left feeling like so refreshed and built up, and one that I recommend to tons of people.
I loved that book so much I gave it to my father-in-law for Christmas,
Oh.
which he
And
loved. So, great. My next book, this was another easy pick. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This book is it's basically the history that we don't learn in school. So it combines history and science and medical information and ethics and humanity, and it is heartbreakingly tragic and terribly sad, but also like so deeply important to read. It talks about the sacrifice that Black Americans have given to the medical industry and how Henrietta, I mean, her life and legacy lives on through these cells, and she was not credited with it until, I mean, recently. There are medical students who just now have learned who she is, and these cells have so deeply impacted medical history. I think it might be one of the most important books that I feel like people could read to learn just so many things. Also, as women, like, you know, there's doctor's appointments that we should be going to. And I mean, this book, I was like, yeah, we should make sure that appointment happens on the regular because it is important and necessary for our medical care. But yeah, it's the story of really the last couple of years of Henrietta's life and how her legacy is lived on, but it is like so important and tragic. And I know that might not compel you to read it, but like, please read this book because it really is so good and necessary to read.
Wow, it does sound like a really, really good one.
It
Wow.
is. It draws you in so quickly too.
Oh, I love a good book that draws you in right away too.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, my second book that I thought of is called Family Driven Faith, and this one's by Vadi Bakum. And I call this one a pep rally. If you are a pep rally book, if you are a Christian family thinking about homeschooling, or if you've been homeschooling for a while, maybe you're feeling a little uncertain or maybe feeling a little doubt, maybe discouraged, this book will be the wind to your sails. It talks about education, but it also talks about just life, marriage, parenthood, discipleship, just different ideas to consider and think about critically. Our ultimate goal with homeschooling, I think our faith is the most important thing about us, period. And then, of course, it's a big part of our homeschooling, and so our ultimate goal being that 3 John 4 idea that there's no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in truth. And so just different ideas to think about things that you are doing or to think critically about things maybe you could be doing differently, but in just a really, really encouraging way. He does not mince words. And so it's sort of one of those like, hold on to your hats, because he's going to be saying some things that are going to really, you might be uncomfortable a little bit. I felt a little uncomfortable, but it was good and in a good way, like, okay, you know what? He's got a really good point here, that kind of idea. So definitely a good read if you're a Christian homeschooling family, if you're considering it, or if you're just kind of feeling in a little, like a bit of a rut of discouragement. He will be your pep rally book for sure.
I'll have to add that to my list.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I think we all need those books, right? That are like the pep rally books.
Yes, you do.
Yes.
And just good teachers who are just solid, who maybe steps ahead of us that can look back and we with insight, and then we can apply it. I'm thankful for teachers.
Yeah, that's so good. So my next book that I chose was The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. And I've actually been reading a lot of books lately that are, or like listening to podcasts about screens, because I have really been like so aware of my screen time, because when I became a mom, I did not have a smartphone when I became a mom. And so I feel like I've had this weird journey with like screens and busyness and all these things. And so I've been reading a lot. I feel like I've just been like devouring books and podcasts on screens. But I've always kind of had this bent toward like living a slower paced life. And then I had a house full of teenagers who are in sports and activities, and it kind of all got thrown to the wayside. And so this book for me, which I actually read pretty recently, was kind of helping me to like get back to prioritizing what really matters, especially as like my kids are, my oldest is in his senior year, and I'm like, oh my word, I just feel like I need to savor all of the moments, and I think for anybody, homeschooling or not, it's just easy to get caught up in the busyness. And I think this really gives a good like scripture centered, it really just talks about like how Jesus lived his life, and just kind of refocuses to what really matters, especially because we live in this like consumeristic and go and scroll obsessed world. And it really helped me to kind of like refocus in, slow down, unbusy my life, and focus on the practices that the Bible talks about that Jesus did, like Sabbath and solitude and prayer and all of these things that I do, but like sometimes it's like, well, why do I do them? Or what is the point? Or like, how does that affect my actual life? And this really was a really good read. And I will say that I can tell I don't agree politically with everything that he believes, but regardless, like, because I feel like sometimes if you hear a name and you're like, oh, I don't know, that's a person that I feel like is on a different end of the spectrum, the political spectrum, you might be tempted to not, pick up a book by them. But for me, this was so centered on scripture. It was so centered on Jesus. And I think sometimes it can be important to read books that are written by people that you don't agree 100% with, knowing that you'll have to discern and look at things through kind of take the meat and spit out the bones sort of thing. But I really found it rich in scripture and very centered on Jesus and his life and his practices.
Yeah, that's good.
Has
I've read
anyone
that
else
book.
read this?
I've read it twice actually at different times
Yeah.
and found it really beneficial. It was encouraging and just the right amount of encouragement, especially to practice Sabbath and practice rest. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it for sure. My next book is called Tending the Heart of Virtue, How Classic Stories Awaken a Child's Moral Imagination. And it's by Vigen Guroyan. And I think, especially if you are a classical or Charlotte Mason educator, it is a must read. It's actually similar to Rembrandt is in the Wind, where Guroyan takes you through 15 different classic stories like The Velveteen Rabbit, Charlotte's Web, The Princess and the Goblin. And each chapter, he highlights how good stories awaken us to what is truly good and beautiful. And they teach children about love and redemption and friendship and courage and faith, all in this compelling way that really does enliven the moral imagination of children. I found the book super fun because as he's talking about a lot of these stories, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I just read that. Like, The Princess and the Goblin was not a book I read growing up, but now I've read it twice because it's in our curriculum in third grade. And so I feel like I got so much joy out of this book because he's talking about a lot of the stories that I have spent the last, 5 years immersed in. But also, it just helped me understand the value in fairy tales, in myths, in folk tales, things that, again, I didn't have in my education growing up. And I have now started to enjoy with my children through re-educating myself as a homeschool mom. And I feel like in the book, he just really brings it home to the value in it and really the beauty that is found within story.
I also really loved that book. Probably because I spent the same years that you did immersed in
Totally.
those classic stories.
Totally.
Okay, I've never even heard of this book before. Maybe this is because I am not a Charlotte Mason mom, but I've never heard of it. And now it's like on my list.
Bump it up there, put it at the top.
For sure. For sure.
Okay, my last selection was my hardest one, and I dropped it in our little group chat as a joke, and it got put on the list. So I was like, let's go for it. Um
For it.
I'm cheating because I have 8 books in one. So The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower. Now,
Everyone is
this
talking about this right now.
Everyone.
for
Everyone.
a
For
reason.
good reason. For good reason.
Good reason. It is like, okay, we're not, as Charlotte Mason homeschoolers, those of us who do, we're not supposed to read twaddle, but like this book, it's in that in between. Like it's not twaddle, but it's one of my friends, I was like talking through this with a friend, and she was like, I would say each novella or like each section is not living, but the series on a whole is, because there's like things that you pull out in each little book and they all combine together in this delightfully wonderful way. Um, it is like it's like a dessert that's good for you. Like you can collapse into the story, you feel refreshed, your brain is working, you're thinking through. There's like Emma, I I love her. It's I equate it kind of to Jane Austen in that it's a delightful story that you can fall into, but it doesn't have like social political commentary on it. Like Dickens, who wrote, he had these social political commentaries that he was writing within the story, and like that's not what this is. So you go to Lapis Lazuli and you're in London and there's so many wonderful things, and like I I'm borrowing this series from a friend. I've asked for it all for Christmas. Like I could live in this world forever and just be thrilled.
Yeah, I just finished book 5 and
Okay.
I really honestly sobbed at the end. I don't know if it just like it had some personal
Oh,
connections, like the footprints on the stairs part where I was
yes.
like,
There's
It just got me. I will say, like, I had high expectations going into the series because so many people had talked about it. It does have a slower start. Like, the first book was only
yeah.
a 3 out of 5 stars for me, but the fifth book was like 5 out of 5 stars. And
And
I have book 6, book 7 and 8 are on my Christmas list, and I'm
okay.
trying not to like zoom through them, but I can already tell this is probably going to be a series I go back and revisit because, like,
Yeah.
as the stories go on, you just learn the characters more, and yeah, it's a fun series for sure.
My friend has texted me every day. She's like, "Have you gotten to this date yet? Have you gotten to this
Ah,
date?" And like, there's a line behind me, like she's leading the pack, and then like I have to pass this. It's like Sisterhood of the Traveling Journals. Um, and then there's like this grief. There's this line of grief that it makes you recognize your own grief and like it is it. Yeah. Again, everybody read it.
Well, this book, I've had it, the first one, in and out of my Amazon cart, like all the time. So I guess I got to keep it in now.
Yep. And check
So,
out.
and check it out. Yes, I have to actually
Yes, yeah.
hit check out. Yes. So I really, because I chose two like nonfiction books, I really wanted to choose a fiction book. And my first instinct was like Pride and Prejudice, because it's just my favorite book of all time, you know? But I was like, well, everybody knows about Pride and Prejudice already, Jess. It's kind of like not really unusual. You know, everybody recommends it. It's not very new or and then I recently read this book called Theo of Golden by Alan Levi, and it was another one that everybody was
Yeah.
recommending it. Um, I wasn't sure what to expect. It is different than any book I really have read recently, but I also feel like I've been reading a lot of really light Christian, like, fiction that's like not romance, but like, you know, love stories. So it was very different from that, you know? But it's like this beautiful, rich story of this man named Theo who goes to live in the town of Golden and he meets all these people. And I don't want to say a lot about the story itself because I feel like I want I want people to read it and I want people to really experience it for themselves. But the entire, I don't know, first like 2/3 of the story, there's just a lot of beautiful, rich language. And just as a writer, the author is amazing as a writer. One of my boys really wants to be a writer. And I told him, I said, I actually don't even know how much you'll love the story. Once I got to the end, I was like, oh, I think you will actually like the story. But I said, I think you should read this just to experience his writing because he
mm,
just uses really descriptive language that is really beautiful. And the way the author describes the relationships within the story and the friendships and how Theo really develops these deep friendships and was really present in his relationships were it was amazing to me. I just really felt like there were a lot of like gospel themes,
mhm.
really about like humbling yourself to serve others. And the whole time I'm reading this book, I'm like, there's more to the story. There's more. You know, I know that there's something that's coming. And then when it came, I was like, whoa, I was not expecting this at all. It really was not how I thought the story was going to go at all. And it really gave me a lot to think about in the end, which I think is the tell of a good book, you know, where
Mhm.
you leave the
Yes.
book and you just keep thinking about it. And I don't know. I want to talk about it with everybody that I know, but I don't know anybody else that's read it except Katie. You said you've read it, right?
Yeah, I just finished it like 3 weeks ago. And it was one of those books I'd heard so much about, and so I had different expectations, and it felt kind of slow for me to get through, but
Yeah.
definitely it is exactly like you described, Jess, and the ending was made it all worth it. Like, it's not a bombshell ending, but the ending I still was
Right.
kind of shocked by, and it just felt
Yes.
like, "Oh, yes, this is what I've been waiting for this whole book."
Yes.
And looking back on it, it is very beautiful. Just the book itself is a beautiful story. That's kind of like the best description. And you can't really say much more than that because you don't want to give it away. But It's
Right.
good.
And
It's good.
I actually feel like I have to reread it now, knowing the ending, and I feel like I'll have a
Yes.
different view of the book even.
Yes.
Those are the best kinds of books that leave you at the end still thinking and that you want to read
Yes.
again. Yeah, I love those kinds of books.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, my last pick is another nonfiction book. I have a problem. They are like my go-to. I have to tell myself every now and then, you have to read fiction too. But this one I really liked a lot. And as I was trying to narrow it down, books for homeschooling moms, I thought this was a really good one. So it's called The Whole Brain Child by Danielle Siegel and Tina Bryson. And I read it shortly after, maybe right around my son's first diagnosis. We hadn't gotten into therapy yet. We were kind of just grasping for whatever we could find. We just were having a hard time at home and really needed help. And so it's not a book about disability, but it was just a really, really good guide with different tools. I think it's got like 12 different strategies to implement that you can do right away, just kind of practical things. And it just was super, super helpful. I think when I finished it, it sort of felt like, man, I wish I would have read this sooner. And it's kind of, you'll see it if you look at Amazon charts and things geared towards younger kids. But actually, I think the book even talks about the strategies going up through early adolescence. And some of the strategies and things really didn't work until he got a little older too. But I really just appreciated the insight, just that like physiological understanding of what's going on in his brain. And if you're in that disability realm, autism or ADHD, anxiety, that kind of any of those areas, it's a book that would be just, I think, really, really helpful and encouraging, just because sometimes you get to a point where you've tried everything you can think and you just are still struggling and just a little insight to help. It just was really, really really helpful. And so that's one I would recommend. It's from a secular perspective, but kind of like you talked about earlier, Jess, like we can read books from a secular perspective and and still be able to pull really good, helpful things from it, kind of that, the mama bear apologetics, that chew and spit kind of mentalities. We can read and just discern what is good and useful and that kind of idea. But The Whole Brain Child, it was a good one.
Yeah, I've read that one too and really enjoyed parts of it, even though I don't fall in that category of disability. But I think just understanding the research behind how the brain works and how
Yeah.
that applies to our children and parenting, I found that really valuable.
It's not written for disability. And so any family, with any kind of children with big emotions or big feelings and just trying to work through what that looks like, any family could benefit from it. But certainly if you're in the disability world, it would be helpful too, I think.
This book,
Yeah.
The Whole Brain Child, shows up on a lot of adoptive family book lists too.
That's it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's really good. My last book is called Teaching from Rest, A Homeschooler's Guide to Unshakable Peace, and it's by Sarah Mackenzie. This was one of the first books I ever saw in regards to homeschooling. I think I read this before I was even technically homeschooling, and I just found it really valuable. It is super short. I think it's only like 77 pages. I've read it at least 3 times. I feel like every couple of years I pull it off the shelf and I think, I need to revisit this. It's just
Yeah.
that shot in the arm of encouragement to keep your focus on what really matters, to simplify, especially when it comes to your schedule or your curriculum, and just focusing on being faithful over being successful in your homeschooling. And I love the encouragement to remember the point. Like, remember your why of why you're homeschooling, and just to educate in a way that is authentic to you and to your children, and not to copy what you've seen online. Have any of you read it before?
Oh,
Yes.
every year.
Yep.
So good.
Okay.
It's like required summer reading. Sarah Mackenzie,
Right.
she's just so good. It's just,
Yeah.
and because it's so short, it's like this is a sustainable rhythm. I can read this every summer and just, and be refreshed by it. It's so good.
It seems like it's one of those books that I would just give to any friend who is brand new to homeschooling. Like, here, you need to read this as you're beginning. And then, yeah, like you said, read it every summer,
Yeah.
probably.
Yes,
good.
especially with starting, it's so overwhelming. All the curriculum choices, and do we do this and that, and do I need this and that? And she's just really good at like keeping the main things, and helping remind. I love that book.
Yeah,
it's good.
it's really wonderful.
Well, on that note, thank you all for joining us today for today's roundtable. I think we could do a part 2 of this. So let us know
Totally.
if you guys want to see a part 2 or part 3. I'm already thinking of other books as we're
Same.
talking. Oh, I could have included that one. So we
Yeah.
hope that this gave you some new titles to put on your to be read list. I know I have read almost all of these books, but there's still 2 that I haven't read, and they're going to go right at the top of my list. And then you can be sure to check in the show notes for any links to the resources and books that we mentioned in today's show. You can also find us on Instagram at the Honest Homeschool Podcast for the behind the scene bits and just more conversation between episodes. And don't forget to give us a follow and leave a review. That's super, super helpful. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.